On the 4th of October 1957, the small mining town of Coolwood in western Virginia heeds the news that the Soviet Union, for the first time in human history, has successfully launched an artificial satellite. But the town of Coolwood has a life of its own, and it exists only because of the coal mine that employs nearly every man in town. The only way the young men can get away from the town is to play soccer. The boss of the mine is also the father of young Homer Hickam, a student at the local school. John Hickam is respected in the mine for continuing to work underground and giving of himself without sparing himself. But Homer doesn't share the excitement of the rocket launch until he sees a satellite fly by in the middle of the starry sky. At breakfast that morning, an inspired Homer announces that he is going to build his own rocket, but no one takes his ambition seriously, and the first launch of the test model fails in front of his loved ones. The rocket explodes. Not to be discouraged, the guy writes a letter to Dr. Werner von Braun, the head of the rocket development program, who also experienced a test launch failure, and Hammer expresses his sincere condolences to him. He also shares with the developer that he wants to build his own rocket. And he wastes no time. He studies the material, spends his days in the library, and dreams. These dreams lead him to befriend an outcast classmate named Quentin, and he ignores his friend's threats that he might become an outcast himself. He and Quentin delve into the study of rocket science, and then Homer pulls in his two friends, Roy Lee Cookie and Sherman Odell. The four friends spend all of their free time in the garage of Homer's house trying to build something, and suddenly realize they need help welding. They go to the workshop, but Ike Bykowski refuses them in fear of losing his job, because Homer's father doesn't approve of his son's hobby. But seeing how much Homer is inspired to build a rocket, he decides to help. At school, the buddies marvel at their first invention. This is noticed by their teacher, Ms. Riley. She is the only one who supports the boys and offers them a scholarship to Indianapolis to participate in the National Science Fair. And now, the first model rocket is ready to be launched. Meanwhile, Mr. Hickam is being harassed by his bosses, who are demanding that the mine be downsized and shut down. But John Hickam doesn't let his workers get hurt and fights off the bosses to keep their jobs. Homer launches a rocket, and it goes straight for the mine. The father, already stressed out, reprimands his son in public and sends him home and throws the rocket in the trash. At home, Homer complains to his mother about his father's injustice and how he loves the mine more than anything, even more than his family, even though the job only brings health problems. John Hickam gets into an argument with his son, and Homer shouts that he will never go down into the mine, which his father so zealously demands of him. He escapes to his basement, but finds that his father has taken everything out into the yard. The next day, during a reunion with his friends, Homer is not himself. He is annoyed by their idleness and lack of confidence in their abilities, because instead they could be trying to do something and get into the science fair. His friends disagree. They don't share Homer's aspirations to do something great, and generally don't mind working in a mine all their lives after school, even though it's very unhealthy. And Homer is clearly convinced that the mine is not what he intends to do, and is determined to leave so he doesn't have to live in this dirty town. His friends, however, are supportive and agree to help him participate in the fair. They find a testing clearing in the middle of the forest to serve as a launching pad, name it Cape Colwood, and set up a shelter. Homer again writes a letter to Dr. von Braun about their progress, hiding the fact that neither family, school, nor town supports their work on the project. John Hickam once again speaks negatively and calls Dr. von Braun's work dabbling, which angers Homer, who can't accept such discontent with scientific work and attempts to catch up with the Russians in space development. But John Hickam is relentless. He tries to impose on his son his vision that their coal mine is good for the country, but these arguments don't work on Hickam. He studies hard and secretly performs his experiments in chemistry class. One day he comes to Mr. Bykowski's workshop, but learns that his father has sent him to work in the mine. When they meet in person, Homer finds out that Mr. Bykowski is even happy about this decision, because his salary has doubled, but he can help with welding now, and agrees to teach this skill to Homer. During the next rocket launch, Mr. Bolden, a workshop worker, comes to the site to see the process firsthand and unwittingly becomes the guy's assistant. He gives them important advice about steel, and is even willing to help them order the right grade, but that will require money. For the sake of this, the group of friends decides to get the necessary cachet through the surrender of old railroad rails. The hard physical work doesn't scare the guys, and time after time they turn in the iron, get the money, and the necessary steel for the rocket is in their hands. They also manage to get pure alcohol for the experiments, and several cars come to watch the next rocket launch. The team is worried that they won't succeed, and all the guests, already ironic, will laugh at them. But the cable starts the engine and the rocket takes off. Dozens of eyes watch this humble but so important experience. Ms. Riley is proud of her students, the guests cheer, and the four friends feel even more inspired. Homer's birthday arrives. He receives an envelope containing a signed photo of Dr. Von Braun and a letter as a gift, but his father interrupts his son's delight with his displeasure. At school, Miss Riley gives Homer a book on rocket science and believes in his powers. Moreover, she shares Homer's opinion that young people don't belong in a dusty small town. After school, Homer comes home, where he meets Mr. Smith from the University of Virginia, who offers a scholarship to his brother Jim for soccer. In the evening, Homer writes a letter back to Werner von Braun, looking out the window at the hated gray city that his older brother, not he, has had the opportunity to leave. On the day of another rocket test, Homer goes to his father's workplace and offers to come watch the launch. But his father refuses, citing his busy schedule, and he wonders why his father never misses a single game of Jim's, but he never has time to watch his accomplishments. But he never gets an answer. There are a lot more people gathered on the launch pad this time around. The entire crowd is excited to watch a company of 4 local high school students succeed in launching rockets. Afterward, the friends read an eloquent article about themselves in the newspaper, and Dorothy, a girl who has long liked Homer, asks for his autograph. Suddenly, the police show up from the school, handcuff the foursome and accuse them of their experiments causing damage to the surrounding area and that one of the rockets they couldn't find caused a major forest fire. John Hickam scolds Homer, but suddenly they see as Audelle is being beaten by her stepfather. The man stands up for the teenager, threatening to take down the drunken abuser, and after all these incidents, the friends make the hard decision to stop all their running and burn down the hideout. To unwind, they go to a disco, where Homer realizes that his brother Jim has outdone him again. He's dating Dorothy. But Homer has no intention of grieving, and turns his attention to a girl who has been interested in him for a long time. Valentina expresses her delight at his interesting experiments, and the couple gets alone in the car, but suddenly, Homer is urgently called home. It turns out that there was another emergency at the mine. In the pouring rain, the miners are waited for and met by their worried relatives. Ike Bykowski is dead and John Hickam is seriously injured. Again, Homer hears the painfully familiar words that his father was a hero and did not spare himself for the sake of his men. And in that moment, Homer is finally convinced that the mine he despises is his father's whole life. Later, their mother tells her sons that their father needs major surgery in another town to keep his eye open, but the mine won't pay for the treatment. Then Homer decides to go to earn money himself, so that his brother Jim did not lose his soccer scholarship. But to do this he has to drop out of school, which greatly upsets his teacher, Miss Riley. And now, Homer comes on shift. He goes down underground, gazing longingly into the starry sky. Days and weeks pass, his father is discharged. One day at dinner, his father says he is ready to return to work soon, which means that Homer will be able to finish school. But Homer objects and tells him that he will stay in the mine and that he has no intention of finishing school. This time his father doesn't say a word against it. In the mine, Homer is praised, John is pleased and tells his son that despite the fact that he himself has no education, he has people in his charge. All because he loves this dark killing mine and that's all he knows. One day, Homer learns that Ms. Riley is having health problems and he comes to visit her. She strikes up a conversation about the fair and how she wanted to help them get out of town, since they don't have to bury themselves in the mine at all. After words of encouragement from the teacher, Homer puzzles over finding the rocket to prove they had nothing to do with the fire in the woods. With his thoughts and sketches, he runs home to Quentin, and when they manage to figure out where the rocket fell, Homer decides to end the mine. After returning to the school and proving their innocence to the principal with a tally, they all go together to the police station, where they are shown an aerial cartridge that has been mistaken for the rocket the young boys launched. The investigation continues with a new scenario, and Homer is enrolled back in school and sent to the science fair. A happy Homer announces his decision to no longer work in the mine and to go to the fair to his father, but is again met with misunderstanding and judgment. But this time the young man defends his interests and explains to his father that the mine is not his vocation, but his father's. And Homer himself dreams of space, and he will never return to the mine again. His team takes first place in the school competition, but it turns out that the school can only send one student to Indianapolis for the fair, instead of the 4 students as planned. Without any discussion, his friends are happy to send Homer. But unlike him, his father is not doing so well. There's a massive strike at the mine, and John Hickam himself has been assassinated. Another fight breaks out between him and Homer on this nervous ground. The lad tries to explain to his father that everyone but him realizes that the mine is dying, and with it the town, and he will leave it gladly. So he leaves. In Indianapolis, after the presentation, his exhibition piece of rocket nozzle is stolen from the Homer stand. With nothing left until the end of the fair, an agitated Homer calls his mother in distress. The woman immediately turns to her husband, demanding a courageous decision not only to settle the strike, but also to help her son. Despite his unwillingness to humiliate himself in front of the Union, and even accept defeat in his spat with his son, John Hickam still does what he can to help his child. They send him a brand new nozzle and the exhibit goes over well. The Best Scientific Achievement Award, the first prize for the National Science Fair, goes to the team from Coolwood, Homer Hickam, Quentin Wilson, Sherman Odell, and Roy Lee Cookie. Homer is drowning in applause. He and his team are offered a scholarship, and Werner von Braun himself shakes his hand. Homer is greeted just as warmly at home, missing only his father and Ms. Riley. The boy visits her at the hospital first thing, bragging about his gold medal and the opportunities he's gotten, for which the teacher is proud of her students from the bottom of her heart. Homer goes to try his luck again. He invites his father to the last rocket launch, but, as always, is turned down. This time, the entire town seems to have gathered at the launch site. People are waiting, the rocket is ready. Homer, before launching it, thanks everyone for their help, including his father, who at this very moment appears among the crowd to finally watch the launch and support his son, despite the controversy. The son suggests that his father press launch, and together they send the rocket into the air. The gaze of every man in Coolwood is fixed on the sky, where only the trail of the rocket disappearing into the blue sky remains.